everyone, my name's Kelvin and welcome back to another watercolor tutorial for Procreate. So in today's video, I'm going to show you how to paint a meerkat illustration like this one. Now the process is very similar to what we covered in the previous video when we painted that grumpy cat, but there are a few differences here, mostly because the meerkat is just slightly more complicated. So I think I'll use it as an opportunity to show a couple of more really useful painting techniques. So I've already got a watercolor paper texture loaded into Procreate, and in this case I'm using the St. Petersburg texture. Now for the brushes, I'm going to be able to do all of this with the regular watercolor brush kit. I think I can just do it with the abstract round and the fine liner pen. Now no sketches necessary, I'm going to freehand this one. I think it's a really good kind of thing to try once in a while because it does add a kind of spontaneous quality to your artwork. But if you want, I will include some free sketches that you can download in the description. So to start painting here, I'm going to grab the abstract round brush and then a medium brown color. And I'm just going to sketch out this kind of, it's almost like kind of elongated oval shape like this. And this is basically the body. Now the tail down here, I'll shrink the size here and I'll just do the tail like this. Then after that, I'm going to go up here to the head. And about here, I'll do the ears just like this. And I'm doing it kind of 2 layers of brush strokes just to make it a little bit darker. There we go, that looks pretty good. Next, I want to go in there with the eraser brush and kind of refine this shape a little bit. So first I'll refine the head. So I'll just kind of do this sort of double-lobed kind of head effect like this, and then just erase the extra. And then the other thing I need to edit is the tail. So what I recommend doing in this case is sort of flattening the bottom there like this. There we go. And then also the bottom of the tail, because if you think about it, the tail is kind of curving around, but they're both sitting on the ground. So I'll flatten the bottom. So there we go. That looks pretty good. The key thing is just the ears, the head, and then the tail. It's a pretty tight, foreshortened kind of arc. A mistake you can make is having it go down too far. It doesn't quite look right. So try to squish it so the tail is pretty close. Next, I can move on and do some shading. So I'm going to grab the selection tool and set it to freehand. And I'll start with the neck shadow here. So the face is very oval shaped, so I'll do the neck shadow about like this. Circle back around and then darken that just a little bit. Next, I need to bring out the leg here, so I'm going to do that using the same technique, freehand selection tool, and I'll just rough out a shape like this, and then a little arc there for the foot, then connect it back, hue, saturation, and brightness, and I'll darken that. Now there are a few more highlights and shadows I need to add, but I think now's a good time to grab the water blender and just blend up some of these overlapping edges. So I'll start up here with the ears and just kind of blend those with the head a little bit better. There we go. Then I can move down here to the leg and I'll just blur the back side of that shadow. And this is just to give us a little bit of contrast. This illustration is simple. I'm not going to get bogged down with details, so this whole thing here is just the suggestion kind of a leg. It doesn't need to be perfect or perfectly proportioned or anything. The other thing down here is where the tail meets the body. Obviously it's different strokes, so it's overlapping. So I'm going to blend it so the texture and the color is very even. Now I'm going to go back and do some more shading. So this critical one here with the tail is just where the tail meets the body. I need to make a shadow. Hue, saturation, and brightness. We'll darken that. And that's probably the darkest shadow on the whole illustration. And next I need to add the arms. The arms you could do them on a different layer by painting them, but I think I'm going to use the same technique with the freehand selection tool that I did these details with. So the arms are about, let's say about this level, and I'll do 1 and we'll see how it goes. I'll just make a shape like this. And don't make it too skinny. There we go. Hue, saturation, and brightness, and I'll darken it. And I'll try to sort of replicate that on the other side, but it doesn't have to be kind of like a mirror image. It's okay if the arms are different. Hue, saturation, and brightness. Darken it just to get some contrast. And there we go. That's pretty much it for the arms. Again, I like these simple illustrations because we don't have to worry about the details so much or the proportions. We can just kind of focus on having fun. Now I'm going to do a little bit of a highlight on the face. So I'm going to grab the selection tool again, freehand, and I'm going to make this kind of U-shaped selection like this. I'll feather that one out. Hue, saturation, and brightness, and this time I'll brighten it. And then the last kind of shadow down here is on the tail. Some of the meerkats have a pretty dark tail, so I'll try to kind of approximate that like this. There we go, that looks pretty good. So this is looking really good. There are a few more shadows and stuff I want to add, but I think I'll do it later on. Now I'm going to move on and do the face. So the face is going to be on a separate layer, so I'll make a new layer kind of above what I've been painting. And I'm going to grab the fine liner pen brush. And I'll start with a dark brown color, and maybe around 10%. I'll just make some circles about where I want the eyes to be. There we go. And I want to make the bottoms of those circles a little bit lighter. So I'm going to use the freehand selection tool and just select it like that. Feather it out. Hue, saturation, and brightness, and then I'll just brighten that. Now I'm going to go to the layers panel, and here's the layer I just did those circles on. I'm going to set that to multiply, and then maybe lower it just to a point where it stands out, but it's not too dark. And I'm going to make another layer and kind of move on with the eyes. So the eyes are really easy, but I'm going to do them in white like that. Same fine liner pen. I think the same size is fine. And I'll start by making a line like this. And this will sort of determine the angle of the eyes. There we go. And after that, I can kind of finish it off and do this almond shape. Next, I'm going to grab a dark color, almost black, I think, and I'll do some kind of eyeliner, I guess, just like this. Now, I want to show you a cool technique for the pupils, but this is optional. Basically, I'm going to make them on a separate layer so I can adjust them later on. So for that, I'll make another layer, and I'm going to use that same black color for the pupils. And I'll just try to draw them first in the center, as pretty regular as I can. And after that, I can just grab the arrow tool, and because these are on their own layer, I can just sort of move them around and sort of control where he's looking. I think that looks pretty good. Now, if the iris does go beyond the edge of the eye, you can just, of course, zoom in there, and then use the eraser at a really small size and sort of cut it back. But in this case, it's not really a problem. Now, once that's set, I'll just merge those together, and I'm going to continue with the face detail, so I'll make another layer. And I think I'll choose a slightly, maybe not as black as before, another medium brown color, and I'll do the nose real quick. And then the mouth is really easy. It's just a line like this. And then you could do a lot of different expressions. I saw on the Iraville portfolio, she did the mouths, some of them like this. And it definitely does have an interesting look. But I think for this one, I'm just going to go with a kind of a basic sort of Mona Lisa smile like that. Something simple. And then to finish off the face details here, I'm going to do the ears. Same color I did with the nose. I'll just make this kind of semicircle shape like this. And once the face details are done, I'll just select all these layers and I'll group them. And the reason for that is because in some cases, you do want to kind of change the scale or the position of the face. And by grouping it, it'll just sort of leave the option to modify this kind of open for later on, just in case. Now this is looking really good. I just want to sort of modify the shape of the body just a little bit. So I'm going to open the layers panel and make sure the body layer is selected. Then I'm going to grab the eraser brush. And basically, I'm just going to kind of refine the neck, the kind of the tummy area, and I think that should do it. I guess down here also, I'll do a little bit of erasing. So for the neck, I'll just do like this, and just kind of end it at the arms, because that's sort of where the shoulder is, I guess. Then the tummy is really simple. I'll just sort of curve it in, and then out again. And then at the bottom here, I'll just sort of cut it back all the way to the beginning of the feet. And next, I want to move on and do a little bit of shading here on the body. So the body layer is still selected. And for this shading, I'm going to use the freehand selection tool. And I'll start by sort of lightening and saturating the tummy area. So I'll feather that selection out. Hue, saturation, and brightness. And I'll brighten the tummy area. Saturate it. Then for the back side, I'm going to try to desaturate it. So I'll make a selection that covers the back. A little bit of the other side, circle back. I'll feather that one out. Hue, saturation, and brightness. And watch what happens when I kind of desaturate that. And darken it just a little bit. And that just kind of gives it a more three-dimensional kind of look. Now for the detail along the back here, some of these have almost like stripes, I guess, but they're really hard to see. So I'm going to do those with the selection tool set to freehand. And I'll make a selection just like this. Circle back, hue, saturation, and brightness. And I'll just darken it just so I can barely see it. And I'll do the same thing on the other side. And next, to kind of finish this up, I'm going to add an outline. So I'll make a new layer, and I'm going to make sure it's above everything. I'll select a pretty dark color, and I'm going to do the outline with the fine liner pen, but set to a really small size. And kind of like the cat tutorial, I'm going to do a sort of fuzzy outline. So I'll just do lines like this, and just wherever I think it needs a little bit more contrast, I'll add this kind of outline. And on the same outline layer, I will add some details here on the hands and the feet, just like that. And after that, I'm going to open up the layers panel, set the outline layer to multiply, lower it to 0, and then just slowly raise it up just until that outline is barely visible, just like that. I think that looks pretty good. And then as a final step here, I can merge everything together onto one layer. And there we go. This one is all done. And here's what it looks like when I print it out. So this one was definitely more complex than the Grumpy Cat illustration we did in the previous video. So if you haven't seen that one yet, and you're looking for an easier place to start, I think you should give that video a try first. And also, if it helps, I did put a link in the description where you can download a couple different sketches of these meerkats. And that might also make a kind of a good practice kind of starting point. However, I do think that eventually it's worth giving the freehand kind of technique a try. You know, rehearse it a few times with the sketch, but eventually do it freehand, because it comes across in the final artwork and definitely gives it a nice kind of spontaneous kind of look. And I think that pretty much wraps it up. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thanks for your support, and I'll see you in the next video.